worked at Slack. We've talked about that. We've
Yes.
alluded to that. You were their first director of data engineering.
Yes.
And then you discovered in that role that you don't like management.
Not that
So
much. Not
yeah.
that much. Yeah. Yeah.
So it
Yeah.
sounds like from footage that we found of you speaking that you
Yeah.
essentially demoted yourself.
I don't know. So I don't know if demoted is the right word. I think in the tech so in the tech industry
Yeah.
we try not to say that
Right.
like people harp on this, right? It's a big deal about like IC and management is a
Independent
lateral
contributor
move.
track versus management
Yeah,
track.
it's
Yeah, yeah,
exactly
yeah,
versus
yeah,
the management or lateral moves. It's not a demotion.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
And I would say like Slack was a place where these kinds of moves of folks going into management and saying, you know what, this is not for me, was very much like tolerated to the point of being encouraged. Like my manager, like my director counterpart, who was ahead of all of our platform engineering stuff, he left management to go back to an IC role like a couple of like maybe a month or two before I did. You know what I mean? And there were just a bunch of friends I had there who did that same kind of move. Like Slack, I think to its credit, took engineering management very seriously, like very, very seriously as a practice, as a discipline, as like a thing you were serious about, in a way that like I think a lot of other tech companies don't necessarily, where it's like, oh, just it's a thing, but like really it's the tech in the building, it's the important stuff, right? And Slack was not like that. And that was a great place and a great environment to discover that something was not for you because there was no like, you couldn't like, I feel like a Google, for instance, like there's this sort of notion of a tech lead slash manager where these two roles are kind of intertwined together. Um, Slack does not have that concept. There is a tech lead who is person A, and there's a manager who's person B, and they are counterparts and they work together, but it's not the same person.
Mm.
Um, and there's costs that go with that. The communication costs obviously go up significantly, but there are a lot of benefits as well. Like you don't have this problem. Like I think a lot of sort of abuse and sort of bad practices we see in employment is when you have one person who has essentially like complete power over the control of the career of someone else. And Slack didn't have that because there was a tech lead and there was a manager, and they were both important, right? And they both played a role here. And so anyway, like there were virtues to Slack's approach here. So yes, I guess I was at a culture where like, quote, demoting yourself or moving back to the IC role was not a thing, it was not a big deal. I was fortunate as to be like not so far into my management career. I talked to a lot of people who are like, who want to do this basically, who like, like Josh, the joke I made at that one of my talks was, engineering management is a pie eating contest where first prize is more pie. Like if you just go kind of up higher the management hierarchy, there's just a lot harder management problems up there. It's not like doesn't get fun at some point, right? And so a lot of folks want to leave management and go back to being an IC, but they're afraid that they can't. They're afraid they've been doing it for so long that they're afraid their skills have atrophied and stuff like that. And they might be right. I'm not really sure. I don't know. I just know that I did not do management long enough, and I didn't do it well enough for my technical skills to really atrophy. I kept doing tech stuff pretty much all the time, right? And as a result, it was a pretty easy transition for me. So I don't know. It's only a hero thing to the extent to which if your identity becomes wrapped up in I am an engineering director, I am a VP of engineering, this is who I am, like this is me. And then if your identity, like, and your sense of self-worth becomes wrapped up in it, I get why it's super hard and super scary to leave. It'd be terrifying. I get that. And, to tie this to an earlier conversation, I think one of the advantages I felt like I've always had as a data scientist, or identifying as a data scientist, is I've never been embarrassed to not know something about software engineering. Like, because I don't know a lot of things about software engineering because I know, learn a bunch of stuff about statistics. And simultaneously, I've never been embarrassed not to know something about statistics because I'm not a statistician. I'm not a software engineer. I'm a data scientist. Like, my job is the intersection of these two things. My job is to be able to like ask intelligent questions of people on either side of this divide who know a lot more than I do. And like, it's fine. That doesn't threaten my identity. Doesn't mean I'm a bad software engineer or a bad statistician because I'm not that. I'm a data scientist, right? And that has always been, I think, yeah, like figuring out like a sense of identity where like you have the privilege to ask stupid questions to people, like is very much a superpower. Like kind of like being a podcast host, I would imagine. Like it's anyway, yeah.
I do get to ask a lot of questions.
Good.
And I am comfortable not knowing a lot
Yeah.
of things. That's why your quote, which you just referred to again, your really famous tweet from a decade ago,
Yeah.
coining a data scientist. That's why it resonates with me so much and why I use it all the time. Like
Good.
I
I'm
yeah.
glad. Yeah. That's awesome. Yeah.
Um, cool. Well, so
Cool.
that really answers. I had lots of questions for you about engineering teams and independent contributor versus management track, and
Yeah.
you answered all of the further questions I had on the topic for you. So
My favorite, if I can
nice.
have a line there, my friend Keith Adams, who was the chief architect at Slack, was just said the nicest thing to me ever. It's like one of my favorite compliments. He says, Josh was far too good of an engineer to be wasted in management. And like that was, again, like heart explosion, kind of like nicest things people have ever said about me. That's by
Mhm,
far one of
mhm.
my favorites. So yeah. Yeah.
Nice. It's kind of how somehow the other way around sounds like an insult, where you're like, "You're look, you're too good at management. We got to
I
get
think
you
it
away from
will.
the engineering."
Yeah, exactly. Well, I mean, that's some truth to that. I think exactly. Anyway, yeah, there's definitely pejorative versions of it, but I think it was a nice counterpart to the sort of notion of demotion. I think is what I want to say.
Mhm,
Is
mhm, mhm.
is at least in Keith's sort of hierarchy,
Yeah,
the
yeah, yeah.
IC engineer was a higher status role than the manager director
Oh
role.
yeah,
So
and
yeah,
you see
yeah,
that in meetings all the time where you have the IC is often, or the tech lead as you described it, is often in meetings clearly the person who understands this problem best and is the person that you should be listening to. And a lot of being a good manager is just listening to that person's opinions and making sure that their perspectives are propagated
yeah.
through the organization effectively.
Indeed, indeed, and then again, and sort of the reverse thing too, making sure that IC, that tech lead, has the context on the business and everything else that's going on and stuff. That is just your job as the manager to keep track of and keep a pulse of,
Mhm,
so that they can be as informed as possible, right? And I was not good at that latter thing because I didn't really care about anything that was happening in the organization that was not like the data stack, and so I was not the person to be, it just wasn't the right thing for me to be doing. Just that
mhm,
simple. There's a lot of stuff about managing I love, by the way. I love hiring. I love talking to candidates. I love understanding someone's narrative arc, understanding like their hero's journey, like where are they? Like what do they want to be when they grow up? How do we help them get there?
mhm,
I love one-on-ones, like I think every sufficiently like senior job is essentially like a therapist more or less. And management is a lot of, just listening to people like, you know, discuss their problems and stuff like that. These are all things I loved. Sprint planning, not really for me. Like, just don't. I just like, yeah. I just want to kill myself. Like sitting through sprint reviews and stuff. I can't do this. I hate this. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, the therapy thing for sure. And
yeah,
one-on-ones
yeah,
can be super rewarding.
yeah.
I
Absolutely,
have a
absolutely.
friend. I won't even mention where he works, but he works at one of the biggest tech companies
Mm,
in the U.S. And he is an amazing software engineer. Grew to a very high level of management, and eventually realized that he was basically only a therapist. That
yeah,
was what he did as a job. And I think what helped him realize that is that his partner is also a therapist, is actually a
that's
therapist, like is a
actually a real,
licensed.
like, real therapist. Exactly,
Yeah.
precisely. Yeah,
And
totally.
so it was,
Yeah,
I think they were getting home and having these conversations with each other and being like, huh, our day was the same.
yeah. I have
And
like CEO I have like CEO friends who are like, "Yeah, I'm basically a therapist." That's more or less like if I was to do it over again, like the best CEO training I think is to be a
mhm,
therapist.
yeah.
Yeah, quite
Come into my
possibly.
office,
Anyway,
sit down, tell me what's wrong.
pretty much.
How can we
Pretty
work
much,
on
man.
it?
That's
Yeah.
yeah, that's the job. Exactly. Yeah. And then for
Um,
customers and for everybody, like not just your direct reports, not just everyone at your company. Yeah, everybody. Yeah. At least the folks who are good at it are just great listeners. Anyway, yeah.